We've got several people on the call today that will be presenting these slides and speaking with you. First up, I believe we have Sean Browning, and he'll cover a few slides on the road forward with Conservation Desktop.
Great. Thanks, Kara. Good afternoon, and I'm Sean Browning. Appreciate everyone's time. So this is, as Kara mentioned, this is a preview of our future releases here in fiscal year 18. Next slide, please. So right now we have 2 releases scheduled this year. We're calling them version 2, CD version 2. So what you have in production and what you're testing right now is version 1, release 2. And we'll have 2 of these. Like I said, one of them was a target deployment of April. So that will be version 2, release 1. And then release 2 will be set for September. The functionality contained in all these 2 versions that will be released this fiscal year, plus what you have now currently in production, is targeted to replace / maybe enhance in some ways your current toolkit functionality. Next slide. And then, of course, all the FA pieces on there. So here are the milestones that we have set out for April. We've got user acceptance testings set up for the end of February, beginning of March, with a target release candidate on in March 15th, and then deploy to production at the end of April. We haven't set dates yet for national training or figured out exactly what we want to do for that April release yet, but we'll be working on that also. Next slide, please. I believe these slides are the functionality that's coming up that's related to financial assistance. Next slide. So this will be for the April release. What you can see in there is we'll continue to add to our tasking and document management for the workflows that we'll be moving in beyond develop and modify contract, which is what you have in production today, and go into certifying practices, making payments, and performing annual contract reviews. Next slide, please. Dramatic pause for slide transition. We'll have an upload documents out of context. This will add an agreement search to that. We've got some of that capability now today, but this will mean when we talk about context, remember that's when I go and I search for a specific client, case, agreement, and I select it in the main search, and then it goes over into the table of contents. That kind of sets you into quote-unquote context. This one will actually have a place where we'll be able to go and search for a client and go and grab them without having to do that initial client search. Ultimately, you still have to search for a client, but this enables you to do it without having to go through and load up an agreement or a case file to actually upload a document. Next slide. We'll be adding to our document collections, so there'll be collections for things like payment reviews. So this is just additional document management functionality, if you will, related to those FA workflows that we talked about earlier that we'll be adding on. And that in that release, in the April release, we'll basically completed the entire agreement or contract life cycle from new application all the way out to doing status reviews, making payments, et cetera. Next slide, please. Oops. We're also going and adding some additional tasks. These are, we call them FA Tracker work list tasks. So you've got FA Tracker right now, and you go in and you see a work list of items that meet certain criteria, and you can go in and go deal with those as maybe a proactive way to managing your contracts. What this will do is actually take those individual lines in there and create tasks on them so that you can go act on those, and we'll be putting those in the task management system. And we'll be working to get all of those work lists that are currently in FA Tracker set up as tasks into this release. That's the goal, at least. Next slide. I believe this is the last kind of big functionality that you'll see. Adding electronic document signature for employees using a technology called eSign Live, which is what we currently got right now. And it's the eSign technology that's currently available in Conservation Client Gateway. Next slide. I think that's it for me for now.
Okay, and I will take over for the Client Conservation Gateway functionality that will be coming out in April. So next slide, please. Currently with our client and case search, when you do a business search on that, all the businesses were showing up as a non-CCG user, even if they had gone in and logged in, acting on behalf of a business that still, for whatever reason, would show non. So we've gone in and made a correction to that. And so now when you do a case or a client search for a business, as long as the business that has the person that has the full authority membership has signed in, it will show a yes in the Client Conservation Gateway. And then next slide, please. And so in the gray bar up there, it would show the business in the gray bar with nothing behind it. So that indicates that they are a CCG user. And that's the end of the new functionality for CCG. And so I think the next slide should move it to the next section.
All right, this is Christy McKinley. I'm going to cover the toolkit functionality or the technical assistance functionality coming out in April. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the release where we're going to get in and start working on our editor tools. So viewing and editing PLU attributes, you'll see that this is kind of from the table view that we've been looking at, where we can open up the table and actually edit the land unit attributes, the land use, and some of that other information tied to the land unit directly from the table. Let's go ahead and go to the next screenshot. And then adding new land units. So something that's coming that's different than Toolkit is we're combining the land unit editor and attribute tool into one tool. And so you'll see this is just, we're testing this actually right now. So this is kind of what it looks like. You have your land unit tree view. You see the attributes on the right-hand side. And then up above you have your PLU editor toolbar. We're working right now to build out all the same tools you have in your current PLU editor toolbar from Toolkit, and they will all be available in CD. Go to the next slide. And this just, I think this just kind of shows what the PLU editor toolbar is and what those tools are going to look like. So anyway, you'll have that editor toolbar available for you, and that should be open for everybody to use. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. Creating a new practice schedule. So this is also, we're kind of splitting this up into two releases. You know, in Toolkit we have 3 different plan types. This release is only going to cover the conservation and the CSTWP schedule types. And so that's what we'll be able to create. The old CSP plan types tied to CMT are scheduled for the last release. So that's just to make sure that they're not going away, but that's what this release will have. So let's go to the next screen. Creating map labels. So this should be very similar to what you're used to seeing in the Toolkit map label tool. So that's what it looks like, and so that's coming out in the next release. And let's go to the last one that I should have, creating a map annotation. So this allows you to save notes into your case file when the notes are saved. And with that, I'll turn that over, I believe, to Teresa.
Thanks, Christy. I'm going to be covering what's coming up in the April release for easements. Okay, and the first thing is there are a couple changes on the easement client search tab to search for next clients. So here we've renamed the search criteria fields for clarity and added additional search fields for the cooperating entity name and a radio button that lets you select if you want to filter those results by whether or not a case file has already been created. In addition, there's added columns in your search results where you can see the cooperating entity name. You'll see the easement county, And then you'll also see that column letting you know if the case file has been created or not. And then there's also an option to filter the results by client association. And then one other minor change is the column for application or agreement number has been renamed, and it'll now show the easement number. Okay, the next one is some changes on the search screen when you're searching for case files and agreements. Here again, there's an added search field for the cooperating entity name. And there's also the option to search by case file type. So there'll be a new drop-down menu that you can search for any, or you can search for conservation case files or easement case files to limit your search results. Again, some of the search fields and columns have been renamed just for clarity. And then in your search results, what you'll see is two different views. Instead of just having the one view, you can select to see those columns either in conservation view. The one change there is that there's a column added for case file type that'll let you know whether it's a conservation or an easement case file. You can also switch to an easement view. And when you're in the easement view, that will have additional columns to show you the program, the easement number. Again, you'll see the case file type, and it will also have a column for the cooperating entity name. Okay, one change in the desktop table of contents is when you're working with an easement case file, that case file icon will show you the letter E in the icon so that you can easily tell that it's an easement case file. A couple other changes here. The rename case file option will not be available for easement case files. As you'll see in the next slide, those easement case files will be given an automatic name when they're created. Also, there's an option to view cooperating entities. So when you're working with an easement case file, instead of having the Manage Client Associations option for that case file, you'll have a View Cooperating Entities, which lets you see that client information, but it'll be read-only. One other change is when the case file is opened, if that easement boundary is in the National Easement Geospatial layer, the map will automatically zoom to that easement boundary when you open it up in Conservation Desktop. Okay, so I mentioned that the system is going to automatically generate the name for the easement case files, the format for that name. So when you're creating an easement case, we no longer have an option, to enter your company business name and identifiers. And it'll use this automatic case file name generated by the system. And it'll be based on the easement program code, followed by the last 5 digits of the easement ID. And then that will be followed by the attachment and the parcel name, if applicable. Okay, and the last change in this April release for easements or addition will be a new easement workload assessment report. So in the reports, you can generate this report. You can select states and then some optional fields. If you want to filter your report, you can also select county, fiscal year, and program. And this will give you a report showing the easements in that state or county with this information. So you'll see those fields that you put in the report criteria. And then you'll also see the landowner decision maker, easement numbers, case file name and type if the case files have been created, your easement type and duration, the agreement start year, dates for state conservationist signature, closing, restoration. You'll see the agreement status or easement phase, easement acres, and the NEG boundary acres. status of the plan, if a plan has been created in that easement case file, and then finally the land unit status and acres. That is it for easements in the April release. I will turn it back over to Sean and Christy.
Thanks, Teresa. So this is kind of combined here. We each did a section on the FA functionality and the TA functionality, and this one we kind of put them all under one section here. So next slide. This is for our September release 2.2, and just some details there. These are probably not going to have screenshots in them like the other ones, since this is yet to be built. Some of the functionality, we're seeing some of it in development today, which is why we can show you some screenshots. Some of it's still being designed right now. So you can see the milestones here for September. We've got UAT dates set up for the middle of July, release candidate by the first week in August, and deploy to production at the end, about the third week there in September, with kind of a TBD again on national training. These are some of the details that we're going to continue to work through as we move forward with these releases. Next slide, please. So in the FA functionality, we'll be going and adding new and improved FA ledger Finney interactions. This is geared towards FA program funds management, and it's a piece that is critical to helping us start to begin the transition to replace ProTrax and integrate easements functionality. FA Ledger will also ultimately deal with easements programs also, or will be planned to. It's just this first effort, this first go around is really going to focus on the FA programs. Right now we're still working through the specifics on what will be on the FA side in this release 2.2, but we do have some outstanding change requests, defects, and or enhancement requests that we're going to need to go through and prioritize, and potentially look to include some of those if we can negotiate that with the vendor. And then, although I said we were trying to finish the FA tracker tasks in release 2.1, any that don't make it into that release, because we are in such tight timelines these days, I suspect will then get pushed into release 2.2. Next slide. I think that may be it. I'm not sure. Oh, easements functionality. So we've got displaying existing program data for easements and agreement case files, completing an easement monitoring document and saving that in CD doc management. So this will be kind of, it won't be all of the monitoring that goes on with easements, but it'll be a first step in putting that in, and then some of the tasking that'll be associated with easement monitoring. I think that might be it. Next slide. I think we're sliding into TA stuff now. So Christy, do you want to
Sure.
discuss this?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. This is, I kind of wanted to put a description on some of the stuff that we're doing. So release 2.2 is some of the questions we've been asking, is otherwise known as the toolkit replacement release. So this is the release that we're planning to have all the functionality that we plan to push out into the final release, which is kind of this phase out period of phasing out toolkit. So just kind of wanted to go through what's left, because this right now it's targeted for September, and that's kind of a target date for when that release is scheduled to come out, but that could slip because there's a lot to do. But if we look after April, we still have to build the practice editor toolbar. The practice editor toolbar will be similar to the land unit toolbar, where we've combined the practice editor and the attribute tool. And we're also allowing you to edit multiple practices at a time. So we're adding some additional functionality to hopefully make that work a little bit better. Then also practice symbology. I saw several questions in the Q&A pod about symbology. That practice symbology is coming in release 2.2. We're actually working on how to do it right now, trying to get that ready by next week to try to figure that out. There will be different things. It's going to work different than how it works in ArcMap somewhat, and that's still to be determined. But viewing symbology versus printing symbology is probably the biggest change you'll probably see And we'll get into more of that once we get all that fleshed out. We've got folks working directly with Esri and with the other folks that do this GIS development on what we can do in the web. But I guess just to let y'all know, as far as that, we are planning on using the National Practice Symbology style sheets for printing your practices, and so that will not change, but that is right now what the plan is. And then the viewing is the one as far as how that's going to work. We're still working on that. Conservation products, record of decision. This is your creating of your conservation plan and your plan map. And what we're talking about doing is creating a conservation plan that allows you to select the practices. So, you know, today in Toolkit, when you select a conservation or the plan wizard, you have to pick out what practices that you want to include when you generate your document. We're going to build a tool that's going to allow us to do that, to generate a conservation plan from the practices in the practice schedule, and then really start working on those conservation plans so we know which practices have been approved. So we're looking at moving the plan approval date down to the plan, down to the practices that you've selected. We're trying to get to, like Sean had shown, this electronic signature so we can sign conservation plans electronically. And then being able to revise conservation plans. There was a question in the pod as well as about, is ProTrax going to continue to set the plan approval date? And the answer I think we gave this morning was no, and that's part of this reason is that as we move forward, we're really trying to get to where we can create a conservation plan. We know which practices has been agreed to by the producer, and we know that that plan has been approved and signed by everybody that needs to sign it. The practices from that plan would then switch from alternative to a plan status, which is different than today. Right now, everything in the whole practice schedule is updated to alternative, whether or not all those practices were actually in a plan that got ran through the plan wizard. So part of this is, you know, being able to do this and save everything to DMS. And so, like I said, we're working on these changes right now. But anyway, stay tuned on that. The GIS toolbar, we still have to build out the easement land unit tool if you work on easements. Reconcile easement is another one. And then importing and exporting shape files. So we're working on those requirements to have those finished by next week. And then the old CSP plans, we're really hoping that we're just going to be managing the old CSP plans linked to CMT, and there won't be any new ones that we're going to create. But if we need to be able to create them, I think we're setting it up if we need to be able to do that for renewals or anything else that comes out. So that's coming in that last release. We're trying to make this easier to use than how we do it now in Toolkit, so we're going to be working through that. Being able to manage our technical assistance documents, that's the DMS integration, that, and also we're working on being able to access your folders or your files from the legacy customer folder data directly, basically from desktop. So that's another piece. You know, we know we've got a lot of data sitting out on those local servers, and we want to be able to, if we need to get to it, open those files, view the files, and save any documents or any data that you need back to DMS. And so that's part of what number 6 is about. Managing cost list, and that's for your non-ProTrax programs. So this is basically, we can't use an Excel spreadsheet in the web, so we have to move away from using Excel cost list files that you're using today to run the contract wizard. And so what we're doing is we're working to build out a data entry screen that's going to allow you to set up your own cost list for states, for use in your state by program, year, etc. And this is really for these non-ProTrax programs, easement, CRP, any local programs that you have. You can set up your own cost list file to run the new contract wizard through. Managing state and local data. Travis talked a little bit about that this morning, but this is really where we get into replacing the local geodata that's used today in Toolkit, and then moving that to the data portal or the geo portal that Travis was talking about. This is where your state and local web services are going to be, so we can move into using the services. And let's keep going. This version is a lot, so I had to put it on 2 separate slides. The next thing is rebuilding the contract wizard, and so this gets into developing and managing contract items. So this replaces the contract wizard. It actually is going to integrate with the payment schedule application and our current ProTrax application. So this is going to work a little bit different than what we have now. As soon as you go in and start trying to manage a contract items or start your contract wizard, you're going to be able to select the ProTrax application. It's going to know the payment schedule application and then the rates you need to be using, so you don't have to manage these spreadsheets anymore. You don't have to worry about, do I have the right rate? Everything is supposed to be synced up in the different databases so it'll work. And then the next thing we'll need to be able to do for the non-ProTrack programs, or if some of your states are wanting to run the 1155 and 56, this is being able to create that 1155 and 56 in Conservation Desktop and save that back to DMS. We also have some additional functionality that's in Toolkit for the Advanced Search tool, so we are planning on pushing that into Desktop, and I think there's some additional search features that's been requested that we'll be working on as well. We've had questions, I saw some about when's the soils data coming? Well, the soils data is also coming in its release. So we have soil services that are going to come online. They'll be available in your map contents, and this will allow us to create soils maps, soils reports that are going to replace the soil data viewer. We also have to bring in what we have today in the IET tool for that add-in. So we're looking at being able to build the crop rotation template, save those templates to your user preferences and all that kind of stuff that you need to do for that, as well as performing integrated erosion calculations, which is our IET tool, and then saving that back to DMS. So we haven't started working on how to build that in CD yet, but that is on the slate. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of throw out, and I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet in training because this comes up a lot in production or in our other conferences that we have, is being able to manage these roles for, who's going to be working in Conservation Desktop and, who works in Toolkit now. So right now I know we've got a lot of states having to set people up that are technicians. Any other person that's in Toolkit now is maybe an apprentice planner or a certified planner, whatever you're using. We're working right now to remove the apprentice planner, technical specialist planner roles out of Desktop. And then what we're working to do, and we just turned this in yesterday, is we're going to add a planning support role. So anyone that's not either a program support assistant or a certified planner is going to use that planning support role. We're opening up all the entitlements, pretty much like how Toolkit works. So if you can go in and create basically a case file, a conservation plan, if you can schedule practices, you will have permissions to do that in Desktop. As we move forward and start building out our assessment tools, building out the 52, the evaluation module, there will be restrictions from what we're working with the planning division on who is going to be allowed to do some of that kind of work, because you will have to have some level of training as far as being able to do some of those types of tools. But for this next release, we're really hoping that's going to be a little bit simpler for us to work through. I may have said too much there, so let's keep going. So we've been asking some polls as far as doing hands-on training. We do plan on providing hands-on training for this September release. There is a lot in this release. We're not sure how we're going to get it done in a week, so we are trying to get some feedback from everybody on how to make this work. So I'm hoping, if you've had a chance to put in your preferences for what weeks we're looking at. We know September is kind of end of the fiscal year. It's a really tough time for us to do training, but we did offer some different dates to try to get some feedback from you all to try to schedule some sessions that, we'll work around our schedules as best as we can. We do plan on having both options. We know some states, either for budget reasons or for just personal reasons, you can't travel, but you need to know how to use Conservation Desktop. So we do plan on having some Adobe Connection options available for those states and those participants that cannot go to a hands-on training session. But we have ran the polls, and I don't know, Shandy, if we want to maybe share some of that information now, or if we want to do that after we're done. But anyway, I was hoping we could maybe talk through some of that. And I wasn't sure if we were going to open up the lines after. I've got one more slide, and if we're going to allow people to talk or not. But let's.
I was going to give them one more stab at answering the poll questions after seeing this PowerPoint so that they can maybe revise their answers or give an answer now that they've seen the scope of where we're going.
All right. So we'll go to the next one. This is the one that we've been trying to prepare you for. There's a national leadership meeting next week in Nashville, and we're not trying to get ahead of the leadership team, but since we're in training, we wanted to give you as much information as we have. And that's really as we're moving forward. We're moving away from Toolkit. It's been a good tool, but it's it's going to be a hard year. I'm sorry. I'll have to take a deep breath. I'm probably overstating this when we say this is a huge effort. and they're understating it. But I guess the thing I look forward to is it's exciting to look at all the new tools that we're going to build in the future that are going to support the field. I mean, we have resource inventory, evaluation, a lot of tools such as certified wetland determinations, the mobile planning tool, being able to integrate this 52 we've been talking about for years, trying to get to those things we really need to do. We've been asked to have a transition period of 3 months. So when this release comes out, we've been given 3 months to train you all and for you all to turn around and train 8,000 plus people to switch over, and this includes our partners, to use Conservation Desktop. The current projected date to when the switchover will happen is December 31st, and this is the number or the date that's going to be shared at the National Leadership Team meeting next week. So at this time, that's why we're trying to get input from you. We want to encourage you to begin to use these tools, take advantage of this time period we have that's optional, give us feedback. I did see some questions on people that want to participate in testing, and we will be offering that probably at next month's CDPOC meeting to let people sign up to test, because as you know, what we do is complicated and what we do isn't easy, and so we need to have the best of the best, and they're helping us make it better. So with that, we just would like to hear from you all, and we'll let Shandy maybe pop that back open to take maybe some last-minute polling, and then if you want to open it up for anything on the line, Shandy, I'm okay with that.